With the WINN FM News, reporting, I am Jermaine Abel. The government of Trinidad and Tobago has declared a state of emergency following a recent surge in shootings. As of this week, the country recorded 623 homicides. On Monday, the Office of the Prime Minister confirmed the declaration, stating that, quote, the circumstances warranting the declaration of the public emergency are based on the advice of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service to the National Security Council regarding heightened criminal activity which endangers public safety, end quote. Since Boxing Day, the Prime Minister has been highly critical of both the police force and the public in relation to the growing crime issue. On December 27th, he wrote, quote, the unacceptable high level of violent crime in the country has attracted the consistent attention and considerable resources of the state. There is much more to be done in many areas. It was my hope and genuine expectation that the ongoing national effort against violent crime, particularly murders and other violent assaults, would have seen a visible reduction in numbers as we go forward, end quote. Acting Attorney General and Minister within the Office of the Prime Minister, Stuart Young, addressed the media on Monday, noting that the decision to declare the state of emergency had been a long time coming.
As you would all be aware, the declaration and the calling of a public state of emergency is not something that should be taken lightly, or something that this government certainly takes lightly at all. In fact, in the last just under 10 years that we have been the government in power, it has always been something that has been under consideration for the purposes of dealing with national security. So I'd like to put to rest immediately at the outset any concept or any mischief, as I'm aware, must be taking place with suggestions that this decision that was taken by the National Security Council in the wee hours of this morning, based on information that was brought to our attention by the authorities around midnight of this morning, is anything but something that is not of the most serious of implications. In fact, in the consideration of whether to call a state of emergency, one of the factors that we have always considered is that we have absolutely no desire to affect the economy of Trinidad and Tobago.
He emphasized that the declaration was made based on recommendations from the police force and had been formally signed off by the President of the country.
The current circumstances that dictated and mandated the necessity of this extreme action that we took this morning with Her Excellency, the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, based on our advice, declaring via proclamation a state of emergency in the wee hours of this morning, was based on information provided to us by the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service that, when considered as seriously as it would, dictated to us and mandated to us the necessity to take the action that we have now taken, and to provide you, the public, with as much detail as we can, understanding it's a national security issue, and therefore there will be elements that we cannot provide specific details on.
The decision comes after more than 50 homicides were recorded in the Twin Island nation in December, primarily involving the use of high-powered firearms, which played a significant role in the government's move to address the escalating violence.
There were 61 homicides for the month of December. 61 homicides. Approximately 623 homicides for the year. However, the focus of homicides and this murder rate is not the main reason why the decision was taken to call this state of emergency. Over the last month or so, and in fact building up to this, the government has been concerned about the use of high-powered illegal firearms, high-caliber firearms, including automatic weapons that unfortunately scourge throughout the whole Caribbean region. And due to the high velocity and high caliber weapons, the 5.56 and the 7.62 caliber weapons, you're seeing that when the miscreants in our society, the criminal element, are utilizing these types of weapons, the AR-15s, the AK-47s, and indiscriminately shooting at persons, sometimes missing their targets and hitting innocent bystanders, there is very little chance of survival due to the velocity and the caliber of these weapons. This has been a major concern, not only for us here in Trinidad and Tobago, but throughout the whole CARICOM region.
Acting Attorney General Stuart Young also spoke about the urgency of the situation and the government's commitment to tackling the crime wave. EBJ Harmonics claimed their 6th National Panorama title, solidifying their dominance in the competition. On Sunday evening, they delivered a commanding performance, easily outpacing their rivals. They ended the night with 418 points, while Nevis Community Development Steel Orchestra finished second with 374 points. Sugar City Steel Orchestra secured third place with 372 points. Director of Carnival praised the performances of all the participating bands.
The night was very enjoyable based on comments from the fans, and it was a huge success in terms of the attendance. It's the biggest event that we had for Sugar Mass 53, and also probably the biggest panorama ever in the history of St. Kitts and Nevis. And at this point, of course, I want to say thanks and congratulations to Chairman Cartel Ford, and that's Chairman of Panorama, and his team that put an excellent show together. What I would like to say, though, is, despite the hiccups where, and some of the public may not have necessarily seen these things, we had a great show last night. People left happy, and we, as a Carnival committee, are happy as well.
A total of 6 steel orchestras participated in this year's competition, one fewer than in 2023.
The Discover Dominica Authority, DDA, the official tourism body of Dominica, successfully showcased Mass Dominique at a recent Juve festival in St. Kitts. A vibrant contingent of revelers paraded through the streets, Dominique flag, embodying the island's rich culture and energy. Monel Alexis, Public Relations and Communications Specialist at DDA, shared her experience of being part of the festival.
Juve was awesome. Main thing for me was to get on top of the truck with Dominica flag and fly it. So I was on that truck. Ronnie Pascal was amazing. His team was very accommodating. In fact, we did a giveaway. So somebody from St. Kitts, 2 people from St. Kitts is coming to Dominica for Carnival, and they're getting accommodation paid, airfare paid, and also airport transfers. So that has been sorted. But Juve was a phenomenal experience. I love the fact that you guys have embraced our bouillon music. So that is really exciting for me to see. And the Dominicans back home who would have witnessed the different things that was broadcasted, they too are very pleased with seeing how much you guys have embraced us and our culture. And we're just looking for more great things to come.
The DDA is eager to continue its partnership with the National Carnival Committee in the future, strengthening cultural ties and promoting the island's tourism.
It doesn't make sense to start serving here, and if we would have forged a relationship with different people, in fact, every person Discover Dominica Authority would have approached, it is to have something similar happening in our destination in Dominica in return. So we worked with Extreme Band for the Juve. They would have stated what they want, be it they want to participate or run ads during our World Crime Music Festival, during our jazz event, during our carnival, and we work based on that. So every event that we participated in, they are going to do some activations in Dominica at some point in 2025.
With the Grand Parade and Last Lap still several days away, the National Carnival Committee has issued a stern reminder to vendors to properly organize their tents, particularly on 4th Street. In a notice released today, NCC officials stated that it has come to their attention that, quote, some vendors, particularly on 4th Street, are blocking the sidewalks with their tents, tables, and other structures, end quote. Many of these setups are erected as early as Juve morning and are left in place for both the parade and last lap. The NCC emphasized that for the safety of revelers, pedestrians, and spectators, it is critical that all vendors comply with the regulations established by the SKNNCC. The notice reminded vendors that each is allowed a maximum footprint of a 10 by 10 tent and a table or another structure that allows for sufficient pedestrian movement on the sidewalk. The importance of maintaining clear and accessible sidewalks, especially on the crowded parade days, was also stressed. The committee urged all vendors to adhere to this regulation. Failure to comply could result in the SKNNCC rerouting the parade away from Foot Street.
Regionally,
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
When Joshua Regrello performed the sweet melody of David Rella's High Mass to hit 30 hours of playing the steel pan, it was a monumental achievement many thought too grueling to attempt. But the seasoned performer impressed supporters inside and outside WAC 90.1 FM studio in San Fernando by exceeding the 30-hour mark and playing for an extra hour. With 8 seconds to go, he raised his left hand triumphantly while his right completed the final notes of Inventor. With only 2 25-minute breaks in a performance that started at 6:28 a.m., Regrello always had faith in himself.
I don't think at any point I doubted that it was possible. There wasn't much preparation that went into it. But I think just from being a seasoned performer and performing very often, like my concerts are usually like 5 to 6 hours of high energy performances. So when I look at that, I didn't think that this was impossible.
While the Guinness World Records team still needs to approve his submission, Regrello was grateful to everyone who supported him. He said the event was only planned on Christmas Eve, but he still managed to collaborate with top artists including Nadia Batson, Voice, Pretty, and Farmer Nappy.
Immediate response is thank you. There have been people who've been up watching since 6 a.m. with us and stayed the entire time. People who came there, they're just a bunch of people who showed up. So it's just thank you to everybody. I'm very grateful.
Thousands of viewers tuned in via YouTube and Facebook, and so many people showed up in person that staff had to rotate viewers inside the studio. Many others watched on a screen outside.
I didn't expect people to look at it at all. I think so. We had a steady 1,000 people looking to me, which was overwhelming. I remember this morning, right before we broke the record, somebody showed me live and just showed me YouTube, and it was like 7,000. I was like, what? I genuinely didn't expect that.
Regrello received strong support throughout the performance, including from his mother, Kamala Regrello, who fed him while he played. His father, former San Fernando Mayor Junior Regrello, says his son made Trinidad and Tobago proud.
We all know Joshua has an immense appeal to people. Wherever I go, people tell my wife and I that Joshua is a pleasant young man, so that speaks volumes of his personality. And but I mean, the fact that he has that nexus with very important performers like Nadia Watson and for Voice who's performing right now, it tells you how well accepted he is.
Tourism Minister Randall Mitchell praised Regrello's perseverance and called his performance an inspirational story for the world.
It's something that we can boast about. We don't only have steel pan players here, and certainly a challenge can be put out there to the world that we are the stamina men here in Trinidad and Tobago, particularly in San Fernando. We have the stamina, we have the grit, we have the determination as represented and exemplified by Joshua Regrello over these last 31 hours.
Mitchell urged local musicians to follow Regrello's example and continue to promote TNT's rich culture globally. Kevin Feldman, CNC3 News.
Well, Acting Chief Magistrate Faith McGusty this morning refused to revoke the bail of Assistant Commissioner of Police Calvin Brutus over concerns that he was making an attempt to cross over into neighboring Brazil from Letem 2 weeks ago. The Special Organized Crime Unit of the Guyana Police Force withdrew the bail revocation request after the magistrate denied that request. According to a press statement by one of Bruce's attorney, Hugh Anderson, Soko withdrew the application when the case was called at the Georgetown Magistrates Court. He said despite the plea for a reason for the withdrawal, the state refused to provide the court with any reason for its decision. The state had accused Brutus of attempting to leave Guyana for Brazil, but according to his attorney, those allegations were hollow and vexatious. Brutus has denied the allegations that he attempted to leave Guyana for Brazil by the Takatu crossing in Letem. telling the court that at the time he was awaiting a delivery from neighboring Brazil. In an affidavit submitted to the Georgia Magistrates Court, he also said the allegations against him are baseless, false, and calculated to mislead the public. Providing the court with copies of his ticket, Brutus, who is facing over 200 corruption charges, related that he left Georgetown for Latham on a return ticket on the 16th of December. However, he clarified that his intention was never to leave the country. Mr. Brutus, who hails from Latham, confirmed that he was in a Brazilian registered vehicle in the vicinity of the Latham border complex, but said he was there awaiting the delivery of a package. He said he explained all of that to the police officers there. Brutus reminded that he has no travel documents in his possession, since it is in the possession of the court. He said there was no need for him to present himself to immigration since he was not leaving the jurisdiction. He told the court that his intention for visiting Latham was to see his father, Alphonse Brutus, who resides at Culver City, Latham. According to him, he had planned the trip weeks in advance. He also said the allegations came as a shock and caused him hurt and pain because he does not want to lose his 97-year-old father out of a public spectacle. Brutus's wife left the country 3 weeks ago after her attorney successfully got the court to return her passport. The court was told that she needed to travel to the U.S. for a medical emergency in relation to her pregnancy. The magistrate today questioned the attorneys about the return and made it known that she is already in breach of her bail order, since she has failed to return to the court for the continuation of the case against her. The two are facing multiple charges in relation to various financial crimes.
Internationally, to South Korea now, and the acting president has ordered an emergency safety inspection of the country's entire airline operation system, a day after the plane crash that killed all but 2 of the 181 people on board. The pilot of the jet is believed to have radioed air traffic control to say the aircraft had suffered a bird strike shortly before crash landing and exploding. Let's go live to our correspondent, Rupert Wingfield-Hayes, who is also at the airport. And Rupert, it is still a case of more questions than answered at the moment.
It really is. And as you say, the pictures that you were showing, that's the same as the scene behind me here, floodlit around the tail section of the aircraft, which is really the only piece of the aircraft that resembles an aircraft at all now. So the investigation is going into the night here. The searching through the wreckage is going into a second night here. And as you say, there are so many questions that haven't been answered and remain to be answered. We've got a bit more information today, particularly from the Transport Ministry, saying that there was that distress call, that the pilot did call an emergency before trying to land and had said there had been some kind of bird strike. Now, a bird strike is when a plane flies through a flock of birds and some of the birds get ingested into the engines, and they can then cause the engines to stall or indeed to flame out, to lose power. And that, in the final, if you're in final approach to a runway, that can cause a very dangerous situation, but it doesn't normally end up in this sort of crash. So it's apparent that there are more factors involved here. Why did the plane land without deploying its landing gear? Why was it a belly landing? Why was it landing so fast? Why did it land halfway down the runway at speed, meaning there was really no room for it to slow down before it hit these obstacles at the end of the runway and then burst into flames? So this investigation is going to be very difficult. They have recovered the flight recorders. That's the cockpit data voice recorder and the flight data recorder. Those will be key to understanding what happened in the last minutes of the flight and trying to piece together exactly what happened. But we're in very early stages of that investigation. As you said in your introduction, still really just recovering bodies and human remains from the scene behind me here.
What about the families who are waiting for that information and that DNA detail to be able to confirm, I suppose, that their loved ones had died?
Yeah, it's a really very terrible scene inside the airport terminal, where you can hear wails of people. You go inside the terminal, you can hear family members wailing. The anguish is still very, very raw, very, very real. But there's also been, I think, anger growing today from the relatives. They've been demanding to know more. to have answers, and also to be able to see the bodies of their relatives. Inside there was shouting from people at officials today, and that gives you a sense of the tension that there is here, and the real visceral sense of loss, which you can quite understand. This was a plane full of families. The oldest person, we understand, was in their 80s, the youngest was 3 years old. These were families who had gone on holiday to Thailand to have a lovely time, coming home, and it ended in this terrible, terrible way, and their relatives understandably want to know, well, what happened? How was it that this flight took off from Bangkok perfectly fine, flew all the way back here to South Korea, apparently nothing untoward happening, and then just in the last few minutes, as it came into land, a whole series of factors seem to have unraveled, we don't know how, and led to this tragedy.
Rupert Wingfield-Hayes, thank you very much.
President Biden has declared a national day of mourning for January 9th, when a state funeral for former President Jimmy Carter will be held in Washington, D.C.
The 39th U.S. president died Sunday at his home in Georgia after spending nearly 2 years in hospice care. He was 100 years old. Elijah Westbrook is here with more on the life of President Jimmy Carter. Elijah.
Mary and Cindy, tributes are pouring in from around the world. Former President Carter was a peacemaker who went on from the White House to have a long-lasting second act. As you mentioned, he lived to be 100 years old and faced several health issues in his later years, but pressed on with a joyful spirit. James Earl Carter Jr., the 39th President of the United States, died peacefully at home in Plains, Georgia, Sunday, surrounded by his family. Carter was the longest-living former president. Outside the Jimmy Carter Presidential Center in Atlanta, a growing memorial of flowers and candles for Georgia's native son. In Washington, President Joe Biden remembered a man he called a friend for more than 50 years.
What I find extraordinary about Jimmy Carter, though, is that millions of people all around the world, all over the world, feel they lost a friend as well, even though they never met him. And that's because Jimmy Carter lived a life measured not by words, but by his deeds.
Carter was a peanut farmer turned president, coming from a religious family before marrying his wife Rosalind in 1946. The Carters not only became partners in life, but also in their political and humanitarian endeavors. Carter was elected to the Georgia Senate in 1962, governor in 1971, and president just 5 years later.
This inauguration ceremony marks a new beginning.
As president, Carter created the Department of Education, Energy, and FEMA. He also helped to return the Panama Canal to Panama, and in 1978 helped establish peace between Egypt and Israel. He was also credited for tackling high inflation and an energy crisis that produced gas shortages, marring his presidency. Then came the Iranian hostage crisis.
If there's one subject that literally never leaves my mind, it's the 53 innocent Americans that have been held so long.
Carter took the bulk of the blame for a botched rescue attempt. The president's popularity dipped, and in 1980, Ronald Reagan easily swept the election. Former Carter White House staffer Randy Lewis spoke without Derek Waller.
He faced some extraordinary challenges that many presidents haven't faced within certainly a 4-year time frame, and being part of the staff and managing that was quite extraordinary.
For President Carter's second act, he started the Carter Center, promoting human rights and democracy around the world, gaining him a Nobel Peace Prize in 2002. Then came Habitat for Humanity. Volunteering into his 90s, Carter helped build more than 4,000 homes, even after a 2015 cancer diagnosis and a fall in 2019. The cancer scare came just months later by another big announcement: he was cancer-free.
I've had an exciting and adventurous and gratifying existence. So I was surprisingly at ease, much more so than my wife was.
Carter remained active in politics well into his 90s, encouraging college students to vote. Just last month, he voted for Kamala Harris while in hospice. He entered hospice in February of 2023, marking his 77th wedding anniversary with Rosalind that summer. Rosalind Carter died in November of that year at the age of 96. To the end, Jimmy Carter led a life of public service that impacted and inspired millions.
I would say, as far as public service is concerned, I was a champion of peace and human rights. I've sought to carve out for myself a productive and, I hope, useful and certainly a gratifying life.
Now, in a proclamation Sunday night, President Biden declared January 9th as a national day of mourning for Carter and ordered flags at federal facilities to be flown at half-staff for 30 days. We're learning memorial services are expected to play out over the next few days, including a state funeral in Washington, D.C., and ceremonies in Georgia. Mary?
Elijah, thank you. All former living presidents are paying tribute to Carter. President-elect Donald Trump said the challenges Jimmy faced as president came at a pivotal time for our country, and he did everything in his power to improve the lives of all Americans. For that, we all owe him a debt of gratitude.
Former President Obama wrote, President Carter taught all of us what it means to live a life of grace, dignity, justice, and service. Michelle and I send our thoughts and prayers to the Carter family and everyone who loved and learned from this remarkable man. George W. Bush says he was loyal to his family, his community, and his country. President Carter dignified the office, and his efforts to leave behind a better world didn't end with the presidency. And Bill Clinton's statement reads, Hillary and I mourn the passing of President Jimmy Carter and give thanks for his long, good life. Guided by his faith, President Carter lived to serve others until the very end.